All right, so I have that we're at 12:31 Eastern time. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to get started. I'm going to ask that my colleague Brittany continues to admit people from the waiting room as we have more people joining. Great, so thank you all for coming to the session today. It's called The Road to and After the Doctorate, a Terminal Degree Panel. This session is being hosted by NASPA Region 2 Graduate Students and New Professionals Engagement Committee as part of our Careers and Student Affairs Month programming. My name is Tara Hardy. I'll be moderating today with the help of my colleagues Ling and Brittany. So thank you all for joining us today. All right, so just a brief overview of the agenda. It's pretty self-explanatory, but we're gonna start with some panelist introductions. Then we're gonna move into some preset questions that we have. And then at the end, we'll hopefully have some time for open Q&A from the audience. And just before we get to that last Q&A part, I do ask that if you are in the audience, please leave your camera off for now, just so we can focus on the panelists, because we do have a number of people joining us today. Great, so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first panelist, who is Dr. Krystal N. So using the pronouns she, her, hers, Krystal serves as the Associate Director for the Office of Student Conduct and Community Standards at Temple University. Her professional background includes experience with housing and residential life, student leadership development, graduate student recruitment and retention initiatives, and student conduct. Prior to coming to Temple University, Krystal worked at Bowling Green State University, North Carolina Central University, and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She earned a BA in Communication at East Carolina University, as well as an MS Ed in Educational Leadership from Old Dominion University, and a Ph.D. in Higher Education Administration from Bowling Green State University. She is an active member of NASPA and serves as one of the membership engagement co-chairs for NASPA's Women in Student Affairs Knowledge Community and on the NASPA Undergraduate Fellows Board. An active sister of Alpha Kappa Kappa Sorority Incorporated, Krystal is also a member of Go On Girl Book Club, one of the nation's largest book clubs for women of the African diaspora. When not working, Krystal enjoys a few things such as reading and spending time with family and friends. So thank you, Krystal, for joining us today. Great, and up next we have Dr. Sarah Beth Bailey. So Sarah Beth Bailey, Ed.D, serves as the Assistant Dean for New Students and Director of Student Success in the College of Arts and Science at New York University and has been working in higher education for 15 years. In her role, she works to oversee the college cohort program, which is a first year through senior year experience program, as well as orientation, first year academic advising processes, student government, student success initiatives, and is a founding member of the Proud to Be First leadership team. Sarah Beth grew up in rural Ohio and is proudly in the first generation of her family to complete a four-year degree. She earned a BA in history from St. Mary's College in Notre Dame, Indiana, an MA in higher education from Rowan University in Glassboro, New Jersey, and an Ed.D from Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey. She is an adjunct faculty member in the Higher Education Student Affairs program in the Steinhardt School of Education at New York University. Sarah Beth also serves as the chair of the New York University College of Arts and Science Student Success Committee and is a member of the NYU Student Success Standing Committee. Sarah Beth is passionate about working with college students and supporting them through the challenges and successes of college life. Her research interests include strategies that support queer students and first-generation college students on college campuses. So thank you, Sarah Beth. I want to give a little wave just so people can see you. There you go, thank you. All right. Up next, we have Felipe Henao, who is currently the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs at Mercy College, where he also serves as an adjunct faculty member in the School of Liberal Arts. Felipe holds a BA/MA from Fairleigh Dickinson University and an MA from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He is currently pursuing a doctorate in educational leadership and innovation at New York University. For over 10 years, Felipe has been a student-centered student affairs professional with a demonstrated history of building relationships and collaborating in the higher education industry. His experience ranges in various functional areas, including student activities, orientation programs, residential life education, leadership development, counseling, health services, and accessibility support services. Felipe has been instrumental in bridging the gap between commuter and residential students, as well as instilling a holistic approach to student success. He has also secured various grants, including an AmeriCorps Vista, to assist with the implementation of campus-wide food pantries to address the food insecurity at his institution. He also serves as the co-chair for the Committee on Student Success, which drives policies and programs for Latinx students, adult learners, and second-year students. Felipe serves as the chair of the Mad Friendly Market, which serves over 500 Mercy community members a month. In the past year, he has been able to secure a partnership with University Advancement to start an alumni campaign earmarked for the pantry. He has served on the Region 2 Advisory Board for the National Association of Student Affairs Professionals, or NASPA. His work on the board helped draw the largest attendance in 35 years at the 2018 Regional Conference. He has been interviewed by Radio WADO about the various opportunities that exist at Mercy College for Latinx students. He is a visionary and learner educator passionate about student development, student success for students of color, and college persistence. So thank you, Felipe. All right. And last but not least, we have Dr. Christopher Stipeck, Ed.D., who is a student affairs professional with 15 years of experience in higher education and residence life. He currently serves as the Director for Residential Staff and Programs in NYU Residential Life and Housing Services. Chris also works on a research team for the Assessment of Collegiate Residential Environments and Outcomes, which is a national assessment to better understand the influence that living on campus has or does not have on academic, social, intellectual outcomes for students. He has presented and published research on topics related to developing inclusive communities, such as through first-generation student support and Project Pay Attention, residential staff management, such as through entry-level residential staff burnout and mid-level management, and residential outcomes, such as through the first-year experience and serving as a faculty member for the ACPA Residential Curriculum Institute. Chris received a BA in History from Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and then an MA and Ed.D. in Higher Education Administration at NYU. And Chris's dissertation is titled Influences of Living Learning Programs on Persistence and Engagement of First-Year, First-Generation Students. So thank you, Chris. Let me just see how we're doing the participants. Okay, cool. Alrighty, so we're going to start off with a few questions for our panelists. So this first one I would like all of our panelists to answer, and it is, why did you choose to pursue a doctorate, and how did you select your specific program? So maybe if we're just going in alphabetical order, Krystal, if you would like to start.
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to hang out with you all today. So one of the reasons why I chose to pursue a doctorate is I had a lot of mentors ask, in terms of like when I would talk with my supervisor and talk with my mentors, I was always asking so many questions, and questions that wasn't necessarily answered just yet within research that was out there. And so I had a lot of individuals say to me, well, I think it's time, Krystal, for you to go and pursue a doctorate because you have these questions. And so because you have questions, you're ready. And so that was one of the driving reasons. And I also knew career-wise that I wanted to pursue a vice presidency one day, potentially even presidency. And I knew in that, because of that, I would need a terminal degree. So I started my process of looking at institutions, and I sort of treated it very much like it's the first time I'm going to school. So I had my list of programs that I was interested in, and I had a blend of both Ph.D. and Ed.D. programs. And so how I ended up sort of selecting BG, where it came down for me, was how I felt when I went on my interview. It felt like a place where my voice would be heard, that I had faculty who were going to be supportive and allow me to be curious and to ask questions. And I was pursuing full-time. So that was a big thing for me as well, that I had the opportunity to sort of explore, because I knew I wanted to go ahead and go full-time and just really focus and get it over with, was my thought process. And so when I was at BG, they had a really great assistantship that I was really interested in, that aligned with some of the things that I wanted to do. And so once having like the conversation with faculty, and particularly one faculty member, Dr. Bowman, who we were at a retreat section during the interview weekend, and just came up to me and stated, you know, I haven't chatted with you all weekend, and I just wanted to check in and see how you are. How are you feeling? Because sometimes this can be overwhelming. And so for me, that really solidified for Bowling Green, in the sense that it's a really great curriculum. I knew that I was going to be challenged, and I had faculty who saw me. And so that was really important for me going through the process.
Great, thank you so much. How about Sarah Beth? Do you want to answer this as well?
Sure, thank you so much. It's really good to be with everybody today. Of course, my story is a little different and a little the same. So I knew I wanted to climb the administrative ladder, probably not a VPSA or a president, but maybe more through the kind of assistant provost kind of type line, really focusing on academic success, academic advising, learning centers, things like that. And I knew I needed to climb that administrative ladder in higher education. So through talking with mentors, you know, I knew I needed that terminal degree. I also never saw myself being a kind of a lifer at one specific institution. So I knew I needed the credentials to be marketable long-term at a wide range of institutions, you know, kind of diverse geographic areas. And I have seen people be really successful without terminal degrees at institutions that are familiar with their work and very familiar with their leadership, but sometimes kind of making that shift to an external institution without a terminal degree can be a little more difficult, at least kind of based on my perspective. So that was definitely something I was thinking about. I also really liked school. I had taken time after, actually, I didn't pursue my master's for a couple of years. I worked full time, then I decided to do my master's. So I did the same thing with my doctorate. And I actually felt like I was ready to go back. I missed the classroom. I missed the reading. I missed the engagement, that intellectual curiosity, which can happen in work, but you know, happens most definitely in the classroom. So I kind of knew I was ready. So how I chose my program is that I knew I wanted to work full-time and do my doctorate because you know, I knew I wanted to stay in the admin world. So I wanted to continue to build my years of experience and skill set while doing the doctorate. I also knew I needed to assure mission. I had significant undergrad debt through being a first-generation college student. I managed to do my master's with no debt, so I wanted to do that again. That was really important to me and just important to my kind of financial solvency. I was also ready to do a job search. So I was on that job, it was either on my, I think I was on my first job out of my master's program, but I had been in that job for a few years. So I was like, okay, I'm ready to do a job search. So let's do this together. Some people may think that's a little tricky, but I only pursued jobs at institutions that I knew had EDD or PhD programs that I would be a good candidate for or might be interested in. I was pretty sure I didn't want to go tenure track, so I was open to a wide variety of programs. And I picked my program at Rutgers because it was an EDD and education, culture, and society. So it had a little different spin than higher education admin, and I had a master's in higher ed admin. So I was looking for something just a little different. It had a little bit of K through 12 in it, which I really liked because I wanted to better understand the systems that our students were coming to higher ed with. So that's kind of how I decided to pursue that. So a position worked out at Rutgers, and then Rutgers actually had a PhD and an EDD program. I met with the staff from both of those programs, had a connection with both of them. So it was a difficult decision, but since I really was focused on that admin track, I decided to go the EDD route. So that's a little bit about my path.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. I can definitely empathize with loving school, and you know, I just completed my master's program in August, and I'm already like, when can I go back? But also I need a break. So I hear you on that. Great, so we can have Felipe, you want to answer this question?
Sure, thank you, Tara, and good afternoon, everyone. Like my colleagues, I mean, we have similar experiences in college, but I just wanted to share that personally, I thought I was going to be a model and an actor, but here we are. And I loved playing teacher with my family growing up, and I liked learning a lot. As a first generation college student, I was determined to complete my bachelor's degree and became very involved in college, like many of us on this call. And I just really fell in love with the field and education, specifically educational reform. I pursued my second master's, two masters, as Tara mentioned. And the more that I became involved with higher education, I just found a passion for wanting to learn. I have to admit that Tisch NYU was my dream school. And so 10 years later, when I was thinking about where do I want to do my doctorate, I wanted to go to the HESA program, didn't apply because of the costs and the challenges. And I had a very good and supportive experience with my master's in higher education. And I said to myself, I'm going to pursue my dream that I've always wanted to attend NYU as a student. It's never too late. And this is my last opportunity. The program that I'm part of is brand new. It's the title is Educational Leadership and Innovation. So for me, it was a really great opportunity to do my program online, to be part of something brand new, where I'm part of the first inaugural cohort. I'm very proud of that, and the support has been amazing. And the focus is on cross-sectoral leadership, which I think as the country and our environment is most divisive as ever before, it's just such a great place to be able to learn, to develop myself as a leader, and to look at social justice and societal issues that we face in education, and trying to collaborate with different industries. So that's pretty much how I selected my program.
Great, thank you, Felipe. Up next, we have Chris. You want to answer this question?
Thank you for having me on the panel. So yeah, I think I echo a lot of my colleagues and their stories. I would say that in undergrad, I was just a big dork and just really liked going to office hours, and got to know a couple of my history faculty members just very well. And one of them, in process of my thesis, encouraged me to pursue further education beyond that. And like my other colleagues, as a first-gen student, sort of felt like that imposter syndrome, like I could never do that. Like I'm not at that level to do a master's or a doctorate. And also I think that I found myself more involved as a student and kind of being interested in that realm, the admin realm that Sarah Beth talked about. I didn't see myself going, through history. And I found my way into the master's program at NYU, and I got to do a number of projects there, but it was when Dr. Matt Mayhew started at NYU. He invited me to do a research project with him that we ended up getting to pursue a peer-reviewed journal, and got to go through that process. So I did that as sort of like an independent study, and that was my final semester, but we worked on that for about 1.5 years beyond school. And I think it was like that experience that really made me feel like I definitely want to do this. I really like the research. I like the sort of number crunching. I like how we can write about what this means for our admin community and things like this. And so I say that because I think it was something I knew I would want to do one day. I mean, he had good advice that like maybe you need some practical experience before you go right into another degree, because I had gone from my undergrad straight to grad. And so so I worked in probably 4 or 5 different roles within residential life until I was an assistant director. And I think it was that moment where I missed going to school. I kind of missed that that research opportunity, and it was something that it felt like a timing thing for me. And so I also, kind of thinking about career, and this was alluded to a number of times, it felt like I needed it, to keep going from assistant director to director. A lot of the jobs I was seeing that I was interested in was doctorate preferred or doctorate required. And so it was kind of a convergence of these elements, sort of the timing and all of that. And so the way I selected my program is, the position I'm in is a live-on role, and it's very time demanding during the day, so I needed to be in New York. I know myself, and I know that online programs are not for me. A lot of kudos to those of you who are in that right now. But I just knew that like there are these online higher ed programs, and that was just not something that I was interested in. So I knew that I wanted to pursue things, hoping that NYU would work out based on the faculty that they have. But knowing that timing was important to me, I applied to several other institutions around the New York City area. And so lucky for me, NYU worked out, and I was really happy because I was really wanting to do research around college impact, and who better to do that with than Matt Mayhew and Greg Walniak, who were in the higher ed program at the time. And so, it was a good fit for me in terms of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to study. And of course, you know, the opportunity to have a tuition remission program was great for cost reasons. And so that's kind of how I landed into the NYU higher ed program.
Great, thank you so much. All right, moving to our next question. So how did you decide on your dissertation topic, and did it change at all over the course of your studies? So we can have a couple people respond, just whoever wants to take this one. Go ahead.
Tara, I can jump in if others are okay with it. And congratulations to everyone that has completed their programs. I'm hoping to defend in the spring. So I'm in the middle of conducting my my research interviews, and I'm focusing on qualitative research around food insecurity as a student success barrier, particularly focused on Black and Brown students, and using my student population at Mercy College. And I'm really excited by this. I will say that how did I decide this topic for the last 3 years? Let me take a step back. I think that when in pursuing the doctorate, for me, it had to be something that I'm just excited to read about, talk about, think about in my sleep. And I think many people would agree that that's probably the easiest way to be able to accomplish a doctoral program. We opened 3 food pantries at my institution the last 3 years, and I felt like I had done a lot of research preliminary for my job in my specific areas that I oversee, and so that's what really drove me to want to pursue this topic. For this program at NYU specifically, it's more untraditional in the sense that it's not it's a problem of practice. So you're really coming in with something that you want to tackle, and you have to have a really well thought out plan ahead of time. So it has not changed since I got in, and I think that that's very smart the way that it was crafted for the program. And you know, just as in the environment that we are, again, just this week there was an op-ed piece written about college presidents' perception on food insecurity and housing security, and only 14% of the presidents that responded to the survey said that that was one of their top 5 items. And you're looking around the country, and you're looking about, you know, the number 1 being retention, and probably more so enrollment numbers. So this issue is not going away. It's existed forever. I'm very passionate about it. Maybe because I'm in the throes of interviewing students, but I think there's so much work that we can still do in higher education, in student affairs, as colleges, and as actually seeing this as a holistic issue that impacts student success barrier. So thank you for letting me share.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else want to share for this question?
I can share. Tara shared my very long dissertation title, and it's sort of, so it is a congruence of like a bunch of variables, but for me, I felt compelled to do something for and about first generation students. You know, I didn't even realize like my own experience as a first gen student was different up until I studied students as a master's student, but I also realized that it's a population that's under-researched, under-talked about, and I just felt compelled to draw attention to it. And so I knew that that was something I wanted to do. How and what it would sort of how it find itself, I wasn't totally sure, but I knew that that was something of interest. I knew I wanted to do something quantitative because to me it was important. Part of why I wanted to pursue this degree was to build a skill set around quantitative analysis, and so I wanted to really challenge myself in that area. Number 3, you know, retention and persistence is a growing factor in this field that people are thinking more and more about. Certainly state schools are being held more accountable in this sense. And so I thought that was, yeah, in terms of like, what would this dissertation mean for other people? You know, maybe this would be a variable to explore. And so that was kind of how I decided to go down that as an outcome. And then finally, and I think the rest of my colleagues would probably agree, is access to data. Sort of what could I get my hands on that I could use that would allow me to graduate in a reasonable amount of time. Because I think, you know, one good piece of advice I got in the beginning of this program was, your dissertation is your first study, it is not your last study. So you're not trying to answer everything in the world with your dissertation topic, but you do need to narrow it. And so it definitely evolved over time. I mean, even just spitting out these variables, you know, it took me a while to kind of put these pieces together. But ultimately, the access to living learning programs database which is the group that I was already a part of, it made sense to me to look at how first generation students are impacted by participating in such a program. And so that was sort of how I got to that, but it certainly started much bigger. And then of course, you know, you kind of narrow it down. But that was sort of how I decided to pursue that topic.
Great, thank you so much. Just in the interest of,
oh
yeah, go ahead, Krystal.
Really quickly, because I think I am in between my two colleagues, where I came in thinking that I was doing a topic and completely switched. And so, and I came in feeling like I've got to do quant because quant's going to get me out. And I switched. And so just for like the audience who's listening to us, I went in, I was an assistant director of residential education at North Carolina Central as an HBCU. And so I was looking at a lot of like organizational structure and how do we govern institutions. And so like that was like where I was coming in at it. And I just knew that was going to be the topic, and so right when I hit going through my prelims or comps, like I just had this epiphany of like, that's not what you're doing. That's not where you are. And so I was really rushing to try to find something that could be a quant so I can get done. Like that was my thing. And I remember talking to one of like my faculty advisors, and he said to me, you know, why are you pushing yourself against the grain, and why are you trying to be something that you're not? You believe in hearing the story. Not that you don't believe in numbers, but you believe in the story of qualitative. And so I started thinking about like my experience of what I was going through in some of the questions. And so I landed looking at the faculty mentoring experiences of Black women in doctoral programs. And so looking at it from that angle and wanting to hear their story. And so for me, it did change when I was in that course. And so there are going to be some of you who will go through, know your topic, and you will go write your papers that you have throughout coursework tailored to that. But there will be some who don't, and that's okay. You still can finish. If you end up in a course switch, even if it's a course switch in how you frame your study, whether it's going to be quantitative or qualitative.
Thank you, Krystal, for sharing that perspective. That's really valuable. And I'm sure that helps put a lot of people at ease who feel like they have to come in with a really set topic, me included. So thank you. Awesome. So next up we have, how did you balance, or are you balancing your time as a doctoral student with your job and your personal life? So whoever wants to take this one, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
I can jump in as a, was someone else talking?
No, you can go, Chris, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so I did the program part-time and worked full-time. So I could speak to that and talk about, you know, for any Res Life professionals, you know, like and this is probably true of many people in general in higher ed, just don't have time during the day to like do schoolwork. And so I knew I needed to become a morning person. I had to find hours in the day, and I am not a morning person, let me tell you, but I had to become one, like so I had to commit to that. to find myself the time to do it. And so I, you know, I don't work with these people, but I highly recommend an app called Kwake, Kiwake. It really helped with like waking me up in the morning. It's a whole thing. Look into it. It's like $3. It's worth it. And honestly, like that kept me, like it just worked. And I would just, I found time in the morning that I would wake up at 6 every day. I would commit to not checking email until 8:30 and things like that. So it was about habit formation, you know, for me. You know, I needed to schedule myself. I scheduled, you know, Saturdays were going to be homework days and maybe Sunday mornings up until Meet the Press. And then I can, you know, be done. And then finding balance, you know, this may sound rigid, but I also, you know, I had to schedule time for family. You know, I committed that Friday nights were date nights with my husband, and that was just going to be the time that I didn't touch, right? Like that was definitely, we could always commit no matter how busy we got, that was what we were going to do. Sundays I left for friends and family, like afternoon, like I wasn't touching work, I wasn't touching schoolwork. So I did have to be very rigid and structured with my time, but factoring in those, the important people in your life is important, because it's just very easy to keep going with work, schoolwork and whatnot. And so I think just being structured can really help with balance and accounting for your personal time, your personal wellness, not pushing off the gym, not pushing off things that actually help you de-stress. I think scheduling those in was really helpful for me. And then finally, I would say for like, once you reach the ABD level, like timing from the program becomes super unstructured. Like you just have to hold yourself accountable. And I had an awesome cohort. I love my cohort, and I would not have graduated without them. And we were really good about scheduling time as a group a couple of times a week. So instead of class, we had like group writing time. We had like specifics for ourselves. And we would just sort of lock ourselves in a conference room twice a week, just to sort of act like we had class, but just to schedule ourselves to move forward. And I think that was really helpful. So I think those are just some elements. I'm sure my colleagues on the panel have other thoughts, but those are things that helped me find balance and productivity.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I know time blocking is a time management strategy that I use too, and it's really helpful for me. Sarah Beth, did you want to share as well for this one?
Sure. So similar, I don't know. So I started my program not telling anybody I was in it, because I was like, probably afraid, right? that I wouldn't finish and then I would be a failure, and then everybody would know I'm a failure. That didn't work. I needed to kind of share that, like, this was part of my life now. I think I got married while I was in my program. And, you know, I'm a loner. Like, I am your student affairs introvert. So when I was looking at programs, the cohort experience, it's talked about a lot, like through the interview days and, you know, through publicity for the program. And I was like, cohort schmohort, I'm going to be fine. I just need, you know, a program that will work for me academically. And I loved my cohort. It didn't turn out to be the people that they had kind of genetically engineered us to be cohorts with. But I found community within my program, particularly 3 other women. And we all have such, like, diverse stories. Like one woman I went through the program with had 3 children while in the program, a set of twins, and then another child. And just the support that we provided each other, that provided the balance. I don't have a time blocking system to advocate or anything like that, but other than saying, I thought I could do it kind of alone and just sort of like charge my way through it like I have other things in my life. And I didn't find that to be a successful strategy. So just thinking about what balance means, for me, it ended up I needed to share my story with others, and I actually needed to lean on others and learn from others. And again, wonderful life lesson, but wasn't really something I was doing prior to that time. So those are things that I would advocate.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. Awesome. All right, so moving along, how do you feel that your doctorate has helped or will help you in achieving your career goals? Just kind of tying this back to Careers and Student Affairs Month. So again, whoever wants to take this, you can unmute yourself and go ahead.
I feel like something that I learned in the program is that, especially because I went part-time, I went full-time, excuse me. And so something that one of my advisors said to me was, you got to realize that not necessarily the degree doesn't technically pay off at the next job immediately, that it may be 2 jobs down the road, or the job after the position once you finish. And so that was a challenge for me initially, because I'm like, no, I've been in the field for a really long time. You'll see this experience and you take me right now. And so I will say that it has helped me in a lot of different ways, not necessarily like in this position, like when I finished school. It's helped in the sense of like how I think about the work that I'm doing in terms of research. What are the other questions that I need to be asking? It has helped me to probe deeper into some nuances of what's happening. And I think the other thing that's been sort of beautiful is that when I sort of look at jobs to see what's out there, there is no barrier, if you will, of when it says this education is required. I'm like, oh, check, got that. Don't have to worry about that. And so I think in that sense, that has helped in what I want to do, is that I don't have that feeling of, okay, is this going to be an impact? Because I don't have that. That's not like my concern that I have. And I think in the other ways that it just helps is, a lot of times now, a lot of positions are asking, what is your assessment background? Have you been thinking about these things? And so a lot of that work happens, not that it doesn't happen in a master's program, but you dig deep into assessment and into numbers and quant, and how we tell our story, especially within student affairs. How do we tell that story? That's pivotal in what we do. And so that has helped me in that form as well. And to just think about what I want to do next. I think what's also rewarding about the degree is that I do have a charted path if I want to follow that charted path. I also can give myself permission with my degree to chart my own path and what I want that to look like and how I want to impact higher education and student affairs. And so you just have a deeper range in where you can go to. And so if it's like, I want to leave the traditional higher ed sector and work in policy and look at those pieces, like you can do that. Or if you want to start your own nonprofit, I feel like sort of the world, if you will, opens up just a little bit more in how you can do things. And there's not that educational barrier that if individuals are looking for those things, you have it. And it positions you to be able to negotiate with faculty in a different type of way, because you understand their language, you understand what they're talking about, because you have that experience of doing the research and looking at the data sets and how that informs policies and practice. So I think it does give you some range and some flexibility in how you would want to pursue your career.
Thank you, Krystal. Yeah, I would agree. That definitely opens up a lot of doors. Anyone else want to tackle this question?
I don't want to belabor the point, because I think Dr. Allen did a great job in describing it all. I always joke, and with my dissertation advisor, I said to her, I didn't realize the opportunity, like job opportunities, until I updated my LinkedIn saying that I would be graduating with a doctorate in 2021. And it's comical in one sense, but also as I start looking at these jobs, working in higher ed for almost 12 years, you kind of become myopic about the issues that you're dealing with at your specific institution a lot of the times. And so it is really eye-opening to see how many other opportunities there are. And then just the faculty piece, I can't underscore that enough. I mean, I've been in my institution for over 6 years. I felt that going into my doctoral program, I had great faculty relationships, and now that they know that I'm going to be Dr. Enow, they're all of a sudden more interested in discussing new topics or things that they're like, oh, I just thought that you were in student services and that you didn't care about this. And I'm like, you know, we've had personal relationships, so it does definitely add another layer to those relationships and those partnerships and that collaboration around student success and, you know, issues that are, you know, strictly focused in the classroom, but that obviously spill over into the residence halls, et cetera. So it's great to have that support.
Great, thank you so much. All right, we're going to move into our last preset question. I'm going to make this a bit of a lightning round just to ensure that we have some time for audience questions at the end. So for each panelist, if you wanted to share one piece of advice for individuals who are considering doctoral study or for people who are currently navigating the application process. And how about we can go in reverse order? So let's start with Chris.
Sure. So I guess one piece of advice I would have as you consider, first of all, do it. I highly recommend it. But I think you should consider how deep of an academic experience you want, right? And by that I mean, I did a part-time program, but we were alongside full-time PhD folks. And we went through a lot together, but the experience that they got was very different than the one that I got, because my experience was good, you know, during the day was work, you know, going back in housing and res life, and that was what I did. Whereas other folks were spending their days researching with faculty, pursuing projects, writing grants, really thinking and wrapping their heads around like pursuing a career in academia, right? And I think that is a really big difference that that between the two. So if you're weighing full-time, part-time, depending on the school, EDD versus PhD is a common question. And I think to me, it's just important of what you're looking to get out of it. If you're going into this thinking that this is for my career, this is about the next step, this is about opening more doors, you know, I think that maybe the practical oriented part-time degree potentially would be better. Whereas like if you're looking full-time faculty, really getting research experience, you know, it's taking that risk and then maybe a financial hit for a few years to really delve into it. But those folks have come out of it as competitive candidates for faculty roles, you know, and I really did observe a strong difference. And lastly, I would say if you're in between like me, be aggressive in trying to be a part of what they're doing. You know, I wanted to get a little bit more research experience, and so I really tried to pursue that. And it was a lot more time consuming, but you know, you do have to seek those out. So I would advise you to really weigh like how much research experience you're trying to get.
Great, thank you, Chris. Felipe, you want to share one piece of advice?
Sure, I think Chris did a great job in outlining the differences. I would say, you know, something that I hadn't considered, I only applied to NYU as I shared. It was my dream. If I didn't get in, I'd try again, and I would just do it. NYU was it. But you know, as a current student, I've had just this week 3 meetings with prospective students, and they're all leaders in their education, and they've found me some sort of way. So honestly, if I could do it again, I'd probably encourage folks to like reach out and make that connection ahead of time and say, I'm interested in applying. How was the process? What do you find difficult? And just kind of inquiring outside of the faculty members or the program directors. I've received feedback from these folks saying like, that was so helpful and I didn't think about this. And now people that are in the 2nd and 3rd cohort that I met with prior was something that they've told me. So I would encourage folks to don't be shy. I think somebody said like I took it as it was my first time going to college and you apply to different places. So yeah, it's just doing your research, doing your homework and making sure that it's a program that's gonna match your needs and your wants and your research and support your career goals.
Great, thank you so much. Sarah Beth, you want to share?
Yeah, great, great advice has been given. I would say, you know, don't diminish the importance of cost. Don't diminish the importance of your life and how it fits with the program. A lot of I teach master's students, so a lot of students think about like, well, is that a good program? Is that this, that? And I know we have people from great programs sitting on this panel, and I respect great programs and nationally ranked programs, but the reality is that that program doesn't fit with your life. If the trajectory of your salary doesn't fit with that price tag, then I do think it's something very much to consider, and I don't think that diminishes your experience in the program just because you took those realities into account.
Mm-hmm. Great advice, thank you. Krystal, you want to round this out with another piece of advice?
Sure. I'm going to sort of echo what Sarah just shared in the fact that cost is really important. So if you're looking at a full-time, asking the question, what does that mean in terms of you're going to be covering my cost of tuition? Because that may sometimes just mean that they're covering tuition, but they're not covering your living. And living typically sometimes is a little bit more than the cost of the institution, especially if you're coming in, if you were me, you're coming in with debt, bills, adulting. So do take that into consideration. And the other thing I have is, having sat on the admissions process during my time there, think about your personal statement and what does that mean? And remember that it's a personal statement. So put you in there and share what's going on with you and how this program can help and what you're wanting to achieve. And especially, I was a first gen like everyone on here on the panel, and I was trying to be sort of like corporate and like didn't think that was what was needed. And so I had a lot of faculty say, I want to know who you are because I want to know who I'm working with and who I'm going to invest time with. And so, you don't have to do a whole novel about yourself, but put some pieces of who you are and how that's going to be shaping what you're doing, because your identity is going to go into the work that you are going to inevitably be producing. So share who you are in that personal statement. It's okay to be vulnerable in there and include that so that they can know who they're receiving and who's interested in their program.
Great, thank you so much. All right, now we are going to go into our open Q&A section. We have about 10 minutes for this. So if you want, you can put a question in the chat, or you can raise your hand and we can call on you. You can also message me privately if you want your question read anonymously. We're not going to probably have time for every question, but I'll just give you like 15 seconds to write stuff in the chat, and then we can start going through those questions. All right, let's see. All right, so we can start with how about, okay, so we have an anonymous question. I have an interview for a program tomorrow. Any advice for an interview for a program that has individual and group aspects to it? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
This is Sarah Beth. I would kind of echo what Krystal just said, that yes, you want to be professional, whatever that means. That's very loaded, I think, but you want yourself to come through. You want your values to show through. And any way you can do that through an interview and through your interactions with others in group interviews, trying to learn about others, be an active listener. Those things many times will say just as much as kind of a really well scripted answer.
And I would say, like, sometimes posing questions in an academic setting is better than having an answer, right? Like, I think that programs often look for intellectual curiosity, and they may want to hear that. And so that might be something that is different and maybe in a realm of your research direction. So I agree certainly with, and in any interview, right? Like, being yourself comes across the best in all situations, whether it's group or individual.
Excellent. All right. We had Richard ask a question about how folks dealt with changes in finances when switching from a full-time role to a full-time PhD. I think Krystal, I think you're the only one who had a full-time program, so maybe do you want to speak about this a little bit?
Can you repeat the question to me, Tara?
Sure. So how did folks deal with changes in finances when switching from a full-time role to a full-time PhD?
That was a balance for sure. I think one of the things is I had to realize, well, I think you're going to have to realize is that however you were spending changes, because the income that you could be receiving is not going to be the same as like a full-time salary. And that also is contingent upon what your assistantship, what you may be receiving in your assistantship. So, you know, when I first moved to BG, I had myself a little swanky apartment. I thought I was like so cute and great. And I was like, we're spending excess money that we don't need. You don't need a fireplace in your apartment. I need you to go over here and get this apartment that's a little bit smaller, because you're not even going to be in this space a lot. You're going to be at the library. And so I think it was having to manage my expectations of how I was going to be living or spending. And so I changed some things. And I thought about, like, before I even went into the program, I was thinking about, okay, this is the adulting that I have and bills that I already have. And is this going to be doable? And so if you feel like, yes, I can manage that, as well as part of, like I did take out some student loans to help me. But I had to be thinking about, okay, how much am I going to be willing to be paying back? And so was thinking about that as core. So sort of laying out, like creating yourself a budget and managing that expectation that it's going to just be a little bit different, and taking care of those pieces. And so if you can get sort of like cheaper in rent, even if that means having a roommate for some of that time to help reduce cost, the ways that you can make it as much as cost effective as possible is beneficial. And then if you're able to, whatever time frame you want to put on it, so that if you are taking out debt, how much are you willing to take out, and then how are you going to balance that?
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much. Deshaun asked, how would you suggest navigating the stigma around going straight through to the doctoral program? For me, I'm in my first position post-master's, and I feel like I'm ready for the journey, but I'm worried about having enough experience. Does anybody want to talk about this one?
I know it depends on your program. I think because you have some programs that are going to be fine with it, and then you have others that they want you to be able to talk about it, to talk about your experience, and to dig deeper in terms of like your discussions that you're having in the classroom. And so it's really going to depend, and it also depends on what you're wanting to do. If your interest is, I want to go faculty afterwards, you may have some programs that are okay with it. I think the challenge is that our field is still very much administrative, and it's still practice-based. And so there is going to be that desire to have the experience so that you can speak to challenge against some of the literature that is out there. So if you don't have that experience, it's not that you can't speak on it, but that can be a challenge that you would have to navigate. And depending on the role that you're wanting when you graduate, it may be a challenge for you to find those positions that are going to pay based on what your education is in comparison to your experience. So I think it's going to have to come down to what is it that you're wanting in terms of like your career field and your trajectory, as well as what you are comfortable with, because there's going to be just some pieces of challenges that you'll have to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point, thank you. Erica asked, do you have any insight into doctorates in higher ed versus other related fields such as counseling or educational leadership? How would these show up differently in careers both in higher ed and student affairs or adjacent roles? I know that some folks pursue doctorates outside of specific higher ed programs, so if you want to speak about that.
I was considering like PhDs in women's studies and things like that as well. It just seemed like the education track was a better fit for me. But as far as just my own anecdotal experience sitting on search committees for high-level positions, I haven't seen there to be a bias in type of doctoral degree, but that you have one for the most part. You know, a piece of that might be teaching experience that kind of aligns with that. People might be looking for a doctorate and teaching experience. So that's something you might want to think about. But I haven't seen just the type of degree to be meaningful in the searches that I've been a part of as far as terminal degrees, but that's just my experience.
I agree with that. And I would also just sort of add in, like if you're coming at it from your own lens of, I would say like, what do you want to study? You know, and that's important because every school calls it something different. You know, I have a couple of colleagues who did their EDD at Fordham, and that's educational leadership. But what they studied was what I studied, which was higher education. You know, and so some places call it something different. And I would say like it doesn't box you in. I have a colleague who was going the academic route. He did his Ph.D. in higher ed and whatever it's called at UCLA, and pursued a route in ed sociology as a faculty member, right? So these things do have gray areas. It definitely doesn't box you in. I think what matters most is you're pursuing your passion of academic study, right? Like that you're following the right faculty members for you. And people may call it something different, but I don't think it ends up really mattering, especially on the admin side. Like oftentimes it's the credential that you have and the topic you studied more so than what the degree is called in terms of like the department you're in.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. All right, I think we can do one more quick question. Let's see. Would you speak about the pros and cons of pursuing a terminal degree at the same institution where someone has gotten their undergrad/master's degrees? What should I be considering about the value of the degree, both at my current institution and elsewhere? So again, pros and cons of pursuing a terminal degree at the same place where you've already gotten a previous degree. Does that apply to anyone here? I'm trying to remember.
I mean, I got my master's and doctorate at the same place. And I was worried about that, right? Because it's a similar faculty. And so I was a little concerned about like, would I have to find different courses or like, would this be repetitive? And it wasn't at all, honestly. And I took a lot of courses in other departments and things like that. So I kind of knew coming in that I wanted to make sure that I was getting a different experience. I was working with different people, and the faculty had evolved over 10 years. So it did, you know, shift a bit, but there was some intentionality I had to integrate it so that I didn't, that I could work with new people, you know, new faculty. So I don't know if that's a pro or con. I guess it just depends on what you want. I think some people like to see diversity in what you pursued and where you pursued it, just for the idea of seeing different institutions, getting different experiences. I think some people would make that argument. But I don't think it makes or breaks anything. I don't know if other folks, what they think, but those are my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, actually, we're pretty much at time anyway, so we can end on that. Let's see. All right, so thank you everyone for attending. Thank you so much to our panelists for being here. I've included all of their email addresses here if you want to take a screenshot. They've all said that they're happy to talk to anyone if you want to reach out with further questions. And also, let's see, Ling, my colleague Ling in the chat has posted some information about the next program in our series, which is on transferable skills, happening 2 Fridays from now. So there's a link in there if you want to register for that. And then we also have our Region 2 virtual careers and student affairs conference happening next week. And my colleague Brittany has put the link in the chat as well if you want to register for that. Yeah, so I think that's the end of the, so that's the end of the presentation. Again, thank you so much, and yeah, have a great rest of your day.